Madhurya Kadambini is a work written by Kadambini literally means a bunch of clouds. Madhurya means of course sweet. So a sweet group of clouds, literally speaking. Which doesn't sound so poetic.
But anyway, the work is a very small work. It's written in prose, not in verse. And it actually isn't so common. You don't see many copies of it around. But it is also a very interesting work because it describes the different levels of bhakti from shraddha to prema, which are not described systematically and consecutively in other places. So, as with other works, this work also begins with a sort of Mangal Acharan, which introduces the topic and bestows auspiciousness. So he talks here about the great sweet cloud of unlimited mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's the Madhurya Kadambini. This nourishes the seeds of bhakti. Huh? It's not?
Yeah, just taking it, breaking it.
What? I can't hear it? Hare Krishna, I can't hear? Can't hear or can hear? They said they can hear, so what's the problem? Now it's getting, echoey.
Maybe you can come friend.
I think this is weird now. Is it okay? It's going to start doing something pretty soon anyway. Like squeaking and all that. Anyway, the great cloud of mercy nourishes the seeds of bhakti planted in the heart. So in other words, it's the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna which nourish the seed of bhakti. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is described that we have a seed of bhakti planted by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. There is a controversy. What is that seed? Is it mantra? Is it diksha? Is it your Siddha Pranali Swarup? Or whatever. So there's various interpretations of what that means. Or is it just faith? So anyway, bhakti begins at a certain point and then it has to be nourished. So it is the water that nourishes the seed of bhakti. So of course the water in one sense consists of the different activities of bhakti like hearing and chanting, remembering. That's the normal interpretation. Here we have the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the water which nourishes the plant. And the jivas in the universe are described as sitting in the middle of a desert, which is all dried up because of lust and other material desires. So lust is like heat, and we find that the earth dries out because of heat, and then the seed cannot sprout. Even if there is a seed, it won't sprout. So, he expresses here that simply, not even the rain, but just the approach of the cloud itself brings about some sort of activity in these seeds, so they become enlivened, just even not by the rain itself, but by the approach of the clouds of mercy itself. So even without the actual rain of mercy, just by the approach of Lord Chaitanya's mercy, there is some activity going on in terms of bhakti. Okay? And then he praised himself for that mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he is like a dried up tree in the desert. So, this is an invocation to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his mercy, and of course then to Krishna and his mercy. to practice bhakti and develop it. So this way, if we have water, the seeds develop. So in the same way, if we have mercy, we can also develop bhakti. So like that. Ultimately coming from Krishna. So, as we see, there are various unpredictable problems in weather in the material world. Sometimes you get rain, sometimes you don't get rain, and they may predict rain, but it doesn't come. And when you don't predict it, it does come, and maybe it comes too much or whatever. So in the material world, rain is unpredictable, and therefore crops are also unpredictable. So, on the other hand, there is a process by which the mercy of the Lord can be invoked, so we don't have to take chances. So to begin the actual work, Vishnu Chakrabarti begins with the idea of rasa. And he explains that the Lord is rasa. We see that the rain cloud itself is described as mercy. Ultimately, this comes from Krishna. So the mercy also, another form of the mercy is rasa. Rasa literally means taste, or something which is very sweet. So the idea of rasa, of course, is developed by Rupa Goswami in Nectar Devotion and other works. However, it's not a concoction, because we do have statements in Shruti. So that is why in this work, even in spite of the fact that most of it is quotes from Bhagavatam, he does quote Shruti also, to show that there's some authority for understanding the Lord as rasa. So there's a famous section of the Taittiriya Upanishad, which talks about the different Purushas, from the Annamaya Purusha to the Anandamaya Purusha. And then it talks about the Anandamaya Purusha being rasa, rasa vaisaha. So that's stated here. The Lord is rasa. He is the embodiment of all rasa. And attaining that rasa, the jiva becomes blissful. So the ananda of the jiva is dependent upon realizing rasa in the Lord. So the Lord is the source of all ananda, or bliss, but that ananda actually comes from the Lord's rasa. So of course that's the same conclusion reached in Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. It is the Bhakti Rasa which creates bliss, and the Bhakti Rasa is emanating from the Supreme Lord. So the Lord is rasa, so this is what creates joy for the jiva. Now what is rasa? We have a little bit of a misunderstanding of what is rasa. It actually has components. Just like we have halava. So halava is a result of something else. It is a result of what? Suji and sugar and ghee and water. Then maybe some cardamom seeds,
Saffron.
And saffron, and nuts, maybe almonds, badam, etc. So it's a combination. The final result, the taste we get from the final result is from ingredients, or samagri. So rasa also is composed of ingredients. So these are explained in the Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. These, of course, are also in common with material rasa. We have poets or authorities on rasa in the material world, that is for depicting in poetry and drama emotions. Same analysis. We have 5 elements here: vibhava, sthayi bhava, anubhava, satvika bhava, and the vyabhichari bhavas. Of which the most important is the second one here, that is the sthayi bhava. That is the main element of love, the taste of that love. So we have Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. These are the main Then we have some secondary ones also, but the main ones are these 5. In themselves, they are not rasa. They're just a relationship with the Lord, an emotional relationship, that's all. They become rasa. The sthaya bhava becomes rasa when the other elements, the other 4 elements, mix with it. So we have vibhava, which means prior ingredients, or basic ingredients. You cannot have the sthaya bhava unless you have the vibhava. So the vibhava means you have to have a person experiencing, and you have to have the object of love, Krishna in our case. And then we have the devotee and we have Krishna. So we have 2 persons. Without that, there's no sthaya bhava. So we have to have persons. And of course, according to the person, we're going to develop different, we have different sthaya bhavas also. But as well as the person and the object, we also have qualities and other elements in the object of love which stimulate that love, such as Krishna's peacock feather, or the sound of his flute, or the color of his body, or his footprints, or his garland, or whatever. So these are called the udipanas, stimulants. So this is all part of vibhava. So we have to have persons experiencing, we have the Supreme Lord, and then we have the qualities, forms, and other elements of the Supreme Lord which stimulate that love. It could be sound, it could be vision, it could be anything, words or whatever. And that stimulates the love, the sthaya bhava. So this is called vibhava. But technically we have asraya, vishaya. Asraya is the devotee, vishaya is Krishna. And udipana is the elements in Krishna which stimulate that love. That's called vibhava. So that is intimately related with the sthaya bhava. We cannot have the sthaya bhava with other vibhavas. And then we have these other bhavas, anubhavas, sattvika bhavas, and vyabhachari bhavas. Anubhavas are, we can say, symptoms. Anu means afterwards. So as a result of the relationship and the stimulus, then we may get anubhavas, which means actions which express the love. So for instance, Mother Yasoda loves Krishna, so she does certain actions to express her love, such as dressing Krishna, decorating his body with designs, or cooking for him. So these are called anubhavas. The cowherd boys, on the other hand, have different anubhavas with Krishna. One of their anubhavas is playing with Krishna. Play ball, throwing ball, wrestling with Krishna. That's an anubhava, an expression of their love. Herding the cows or the calves, this is anubhava. Then we have sattvika bhavas. In that relationship, and due to the stimulus sometimes, and due to the pastime, there's an intensity of emotion which is uncontrolled, and it produces certain symptoms in the body, such as crying, shivering, fainting, hair standing on end, etc. So these are called sattvika bhavas. For instance, when Mother Yasoda hears that Krishna is playing on Putana's lap, then she faints or something like that. So that it's not she consciously faints as an expression of her love, but out of her love she just faints. So that's a sattvika bhava. Or in separation from Krishna, the gopis cry, they weep. That's a sattvika bhava. Or they tremble, or they change color, or whatever. These are all sattvika bhavas. Due to changes in their bodies, due to the emotions, then these symptoms manifest. Vyabhachari bhavas, there's 33 vyabhachari bhavas. These are secondary emotions. Vyabhachari means disturbing. Many of them go against the main bhava, that is the love relationship, such as worry, fright, sudden fright, whatever like this. So there's 33 different symptoms: shame, all these different things, they kind of impede the main bhava sometimes. So they're called Vyabhachari bhavas, 33 minor emotions. They will appear and they'll suddenly disappear, so they don't continue for any long time. Sthayi bhava means it's permanent. It continues in all cases. Based on the sthayi bhava, then you get the Vyabhachari bhavas appearing and disappearing like this, and the sattvika bhavas appearing and disappearing. So these elements, when they mix together, this creates rasa. In other words, it's not just the sthayi bhava, but there's taste within that due to the elements, the anubhavas, the actions, or the Vyabhachari bhavas, the worry or the anger or whatever mixed up in that, the sattvika bhavas manifesting as tears. All that coming together produces rasa. So out of that we get the different rasas. We get shanta rasa, dasya rasa, etc. But there's also shanta, dasya, sthayi bhava. And when it mixes with the other elements, it becomes those rasas. So that is, Krishna is the source of rasa, and Krishna expresses all these rasas also. And so he also has these elements in him. And of course in Nectar Devotion there it says, Akila Rasa Mritamurti. Krishna is the personification of all rasas, primary and secondary. 5 primary ones, and we have the secondary ones also. So it's like colors coming together, mixing in certain ways. Just as we have basically, I think 3 colors. If you look in the temple room, we have 3 different colored lights only. I think it's a blue one, a green one, and a red one. But they produce more colors because of the variation in their things. So you get orange, and you get yellow, and you get purple, etc. Various grades of that also. So similarly, with rasa, you get different ingredients in different amounts, and you get all sorts of different tastes and variety. So this produces a great variegatedness in the spiritual world due to the variations of rasas, etc. So just like colors can be, you can do so many things with colors. This with colors, 3 colors, you can do so many things. You get so many shades and so many patterns, etc. So when you get rasa, you have action through spiritual time. We have pastimes, etc. And then the rasa manifests in different ways. Right? So it's always very variegated. So Vishnu Chakravarti, he quotes here one verse about rasa at the very beginning. This is a famous verse in the 10th canto, describing Krishna appearing in the arena of Kamsa. When he went to Mathura with Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men and the cowherd boys, and he left the gopis and the women in Vrindavan, he came to Mathura, and then he killed the elephant, etc. And then he entered into the arena of Kamsa. So this verse describes different people seeing Krishna when he came into the arena. So we have the wrestlers, the mallas. They saw Krishna as Ashani, which means thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is considered to be very hard. It is indestructible. So though Krishna is also described as Komala, his body is so soft that if a leaf touches him, he gets bruised. And the gopis worry that when he's walking in the forest, that his feet will get pricked by the grass and get injured. But the wrestlers did not see Krishna in that way. They found him harder than a thunderbolt for some reason. And similarly, we have the other people. So we have the wrestlers like this, and they saw him as thunderbolt. Because, according to their relationship, then Krishna is different. So this is one rasa called Virya rasa, where there is combating spirit. So in the combating spirit, Krishna appears very, very tough. The men of Mathura saw him as the best of males. In other words, they were very surprised by his prowess, etc., when he came into the arena. So this is what we call Adbhuta rasa. This is also a secondary rasa, wonder, amazement. They were astonished. The women saw him as Cupid. So the women in Mathura, they fell in love with him when they saw him. So this is Madhurya Rasa, conjugal love. The cowherd boys saw him as a friend, and they were laughing with him. In other words, the cowherd boys in Vrindavan were his friends, and in spite of many dangers, like he would go to the forest and then he would kill Agasura or Denukasura or all these other demons. So cowherd boys understood that nothing could happen to Krishna. So they were not worried when he came into Kamsa's arena and there's huge wrestlers there, etc. So they were laughing, joking with him. It's called Hasya Rasa. And of course, Sakya Rasa was there too. The impious rulers, that's the friends of Kamsa, saw him as Shashta, that is punisher, chastiser. In other words, they saw Krishna in a very angry mood, just as he appeared to the enemy in Kurukshetra as a very angry person. So when he came into that arena of Kamsa, then Kamsa's friends saw him as someone who was going to punish them for their evil deeds. That's Raudra Rasa, anger. Vasudeva and Devaki were there also, sitting in the audience, and Nanda Maharaj was also there. Yasoda was not there, she was in Vrindavan. So, and all the elder persons also, of similar age to Vasudeva and Devaki, when they saw Krishna, they saw him as their son. So they saw him with Vatsalya Rasa, that he was unprotected. And his huge wrestlers were there, they were going to crush Krishna. So they saw him with karuna, compassion. How could Krishna fight with these huge wrestlers? He is helpless. This is a very unjust wrestling match. So that's how they felt. So this is karuna rasa. So karuna and vatsalya rasa is expressed by elders. Kamsa saw Krishna as death personified. That's bhayanaka rasa, fear. Unintelligent persons, like the priests of Kamsa, saw him as a material body, and they criticized him because he came into the arena and he had just killed the elephant, and he had the elephant tusks on him, and there was blood on his body. So this is an impure person with blood on his body coming into this arena of Kamsa. He's a material person who doesn't have any manners, doesn't know what cleanliness is. So they saw him with disgust. That's Bibhatsa Rasa. The yogis saw him as Tattva, absolute truth, Shanta Rasa. And the Vrishnis saw him as their worshipful deity. So that was Dasya Rasa. So one person, Krishna, was seen by various people in various rasas. So this illustrates that simultaneously Krishna can display 12 rasas. He also did this with when he was lifting Govardhan Hill, and all the people of Raja experienced different rasas with him simultaneously. So by his powers, he can simultaneously manifest all rasas, even if they're contradictory. So different rasas are contrary to each. Madhurya Rasa and Vatsalya Rasa never exist together in one person. It's difficult to do that. It's very, very difficult, but they're contrary. So, but in Krishna, they all exist, and everyone sees them differently. So, after establishing that Krishna is rasa and he's the actual goal of our worship, then Vishnu Chakravarti describes the nature of bhakti in general. Just as in Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami begins with the general definition called Samanya Bhakti in the first section, and he gives 6 qualities of bhakti. So, in this first section, called the first shower, he begins to describe bhakti. So, his intention here is to show that bhakti is completely independent of everything else because it's not material. Everything in the material world is dependent on something else. But bhakti is not part of the material world. So when it appears in a person, it is something very special. It's not produced by material nature, it's not produced by sattva guna, it's not produced by material actions at all. Where does it come from? It must have come from the spiritual world. It must come from Krishna. Directly. So, it is completely different from anything else in the material world, even though it appears in the material world. So it is completely independent. So it appears by the will of Krishna himself. Only with his consent, bhakti manifests ultimately. So that's the ultimate cause of bhakti. So just as avatars, how do they appear? Of course, the devatas will pray, please come because the demons are afflicting us, and the Lord appears. But ultimately, it's not just the request. It is because the Lord desires to come. That's why. And he may have other purposes to fulfill, not just helping devatas destroy demons. So it is the will of the Lord which determines where he will appear and when he will appear, not simply the request of a person. However, the Lord is controlled by bhakti. So if the devatas have bhakti, fine, then the Lord will agree to appear before them. Or if there's devotees in the material world, then the Lord will become attracted to them. So yes, it is the will of the Supreme Lord or his mercy, but his mercy is attracted by bhakti in the material world. So if anyone has bhakti, then this is a good reason for bhakti to appear. So, therefore, bhakti is independent of everything in the material world. It's ultimately the will of Krishna. But if a person has some little devotion to the Lord, then that bhakti will be attracted, will come. So, in the material world, we have persons who have bhakti in varying degrees. Some are called kanishtas, some are called madhyamas, some are called uttamas. So those that are called kanishtas, we could say that the strength of the bhakti is not manifested very strongly. It's like 1 volt maybe, or what, like that. And if we have prema, an uttamadhikari in bhava or prema, then we'll get, 1,000 volts or 2,000 volts or something manifesting, yeah? And then we have the madhyamas in between that. Maybe a few hundred volts, 210 volts or whatever, ordinary. So we got various degrees of bhakti manifesting in various persons according to their level of advancement. Nevertheless, it is bhakti in all persons, and bhakti is non-different from the Lord. So even if it's a kanishta, that person, if he has some bhakti, is very special. And he's completely distinct from jnanis and karmis and yogis and anybody else in the material world. He's in a very special position because they don't have bhakti. But even the kanishta has that bhakti, the seed of bhakti, which is developed to some degree. So even the kanishta is very special. So, however, we know that the kanishta generally has weak bhakti, and also it's unsteady. Appears and disappears. The madhyama, on the other hand, that bhakti is steady. That person has an understanding of the process of bhakti. He has knowledge. He associates with devotees. He avoids the non-devotees and the asuras, demons. He preaches to the innocent people. He accepts the Supreme Lord and cultivates a relationship. So, he understands the process of bhakti properly. He has knowledge, proper knowledge, to perform bhakti properly through devotees, and he practices properly. So this is madhyama, which is a very broad stage. And therefore, bhakti becomes steady. So it is this madhyam adhikari, or the madhyam devotee, who becomes the main distributor of the Lord's bhakti in the material world. He has bhakti, he can distribute bhakti. The kanishta doesn't appreciate devotees, and he just accepts the Supreme Lord. So he has no impetus to preach also because of that. The Madhyama person has an understanding of the Supreme Lord and the process of bhakti and the process of the importance of association with other devotees, etc. And he's eager to spread mercy. So he is the one that becomes the instrument of spreading bhakti in the material world. He becomes the preacher. He becomes the teacher of bhakti. So he is not pure in Madhyama. Nevertheless, the Lord chooses this person as his medium in the material world. This doesn't mean that the Uttamadhikari also isn't a medium. Definitely he is. But there's a problem with the Uttamadhikari because generally he doesn't preach. And why he doesn't preach? Because he doesn't see any necessity of preaching. Because everybody is related to Krishna anyway. Everything is Krishna. He sees the material world as a reflection of Krishna, and everything is related to Krishna, and even the demons are related to Krishna. Everything is fine. So he sees everything in terms of Krishna, so he has no need to preach. He sees no duality in the material world. And of course, because he's so involved with Krishna in his realization of Krishna, then he's excluded material world. So therefore, he's not the one that's going to go out and start looking at people and seeing if they're favorable or unfavorable or whatever, and start preaching to them and trying to convince them or anything. He was not the one to do that. So therefore, to have such a person is very rare in the first place, and secondly, that he would be a preacher also is very rare. We do have examples like Narada Muni, who's also Shaktavaishyavatar. Of course, because he's Shaktavaishyavatar, he's on the highest level, and he also preaches, but he's a very special example. So, therefore, it is the Madhyama Adhikari who is the preacher, but he's not 100% pure. It's only Madhyama Adhikari from somewhere Anartha never changed to Rusya Sakti and into Bhava. That's the Madhyama Adhikari, basically. So he is the one who gives out the mercy of the Lord. We can say, well, it's not the greatest mercy, only the Prem Bhakta has the greatest mercy. Yes, that's true, but, highest mercy, but this is the common giver of mercy in the material world. The Madhyama Adhikari is common compared to the Prem Bhakta, or the Uttamadhikari. Even above Bhakta is very rare when to speak of a Prem Bhakta. And then the other point, of course, is that the Prem Bhakta and Bhava Bhakta generally don't preach anyway. They just exclude themselves from the material world. And you can't find them anywhere. So, the Madhyama Adhikari, on the other hand, is very visible. And quite common. So this person becomes the medium of spreading bhakti in the material world. They become the medium of the Lord's mercy. So as I said, it's not 100% strong because they are madhyamas, so the bhakti is not complete. They still have material elements in their minds, etc. But the Lord is merciful, and He allows the madhyamas to spread His bhakti. So the bhakti itself is not impure. Just like the name also is pure in any case. Even if a person's chanting Nama Bhas, it's not that the name is becoming impure. It's the person's impurity, that's all. Just like the sun is in the sky, and sometimes we have clouds. We don't blame the sun because of the clouds. Sun is still 100% shining, and if you go up in an airplane, yeah, the same intensity of light is there above the clouds. But we, of course, when we're on Earth, there's clouds in between, and we say, oh, the sun's not shining brightly enough. It's not the sun's fault. It's continually shining at the same intensity, but the clouds are in the way. So similarly, we have Nama Bhas. The name is all powerful. So it doesn't somehow decrease its power, but because of our obstacles in terms of our mind and impurities, etc., then the intensity of the name becomes weaker. So the same with the bhakti. The bhakti itself is not, there's no problem with the bhakti in the Madhyama Adhikari. Bhakti is always bhakti. It's transcendental like the Lord. But we do have coverings so that we don't appreciate it fully. That's all. So there is bhakti there, and it's never impure. It's non-different from the Lord is never contaminated by material nature. But, of course, we'll see that bhakti is also in varying degrees in different persons. So the Kanishta has very little bhakti, the Madhyam has more bhakti, and the Uttam has most bhakti, manifest, strongest. But it is sufficient in the Madhyam Adhikari that he can distribute it, and the Lord supplies. So, the devotee becomes the medium of the Lord's bhakti. So we should not think that the devotee is creating bhakti or anything like that, or that he is the power. No, it's Krishna's power manifesting through the devotee. That's all. And the Lord can do what he wants with that. He can manifest in different persons in different degrees. And therefore we'll find, for instance, in our parampara, whether we take a Diksha parampara or a Siksha parampara, that we get many people in the parampara, and historically, some of them we don't know about, and then suddenly we get a great personality, and then suddenly we don't hear about it, and then we get another great personality later on. So it's up to the individual and the Lord's mercy when we're going to have great manifestations of bhakti. And we cannot say that everybody must be a prem bhakti in the parampara. Not necessary. Whether it's Shiksha or Diksha or whatever. For instance, Bhaktivinoda had a Diksha guru, was Bepan Bihari Goswami, Kas Goswami. So we don't reject him. At the same time, we don't say he was an Uttamadhikari or whatever. Nevertheless, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a great devotee. How did that happen? Of course, we can say Shiksha. Okay, he had association with Jagannathas Babaji. But even before he met him, then he had great power also. Where did it come from? From Bepan Bihari? Not necessarily, because he was a Kas Goswami only. So, the bhakti will manifest, and we can't predict when it's going to manifest. It's up to Krishna and that devotee, basically. You get the seed, you develop it, Krishna's mercy is there, association, so many elements are there, and it develops in various ways. So, the devotee is given independence by the Supreme Lord to choose how to manifest and when to distribute the bhakti to which person. The Lord doesn't have to say, okay, we're not going to give to this person, withdraw here, we're not going to give to that person. No, leaves it up to the devotee. So when the devotee chooses, he can say, okay, I'll choose this person, I'll give some mercy here, I'll give mercy there. So he leaves it up to the devotee. So that is why the devotee is emphasized in bhakti. The cause of bhakti is said to be the devotee, because the devotee decides who he's going to teach, instruct, and give mercy to. Of course, ultimately says Krishna's behind that, but Krishna gives power to the devotee and decision to independently choose. And the Lord does not interfere with that. So therefore, ultimately, we have to understand that it's coming from Krishna. Bhakti is coming from Krishna. It is spiritual, it's not material, it's nirguna, beyond the gunas. It will come into one person, and that person can choose who to give it to. So therefore, he is the cause of bhakti in one sense, because he chooses, I'll choose this person, not that person. Now, of course, we say that what the guru is like the rain cloud and spreads mercy everywhere. So it's not that he purposely refuses, but at the same time, he's a Madhyamadhikari, so therefore we have the dictum, don't preach to the faithless people, and don't preach to the demons, etc., avoid the demons. So basically follows that rule. So he doesn't preach to certain persons, and those he finds favorable, he will preach to those persons there. But he's very liberal in giving out mercy when there's qualified persons. So bhakti is independent in the sense that it's coming from Krishna, and the devotee takes that and distributes it as he sees fit, not according to caste or ashram or anything like that, not according to country or whatever. He can do whatever he wants. And Krishna doesn't interfere with that. It's independent in another way, bhakti, that is that it doesn't depend on other processes like karma, jnana, or yoga. They may be practiced along with bhakti without interference. They may be practiced and cause interference to make mixed bhakti, which is not good. Or bhakti may be practiced independent of these processes without these processes and still be successful. So it doesn't depend on other processes. It does not depend on karma yoga or varnashram. So we don't have to do varnashram before we do bhakti. So the evidence of that is that even if there's no varnashram, when we have lechas and chandalas, they can take to bhakti. There's no varnashram, they take to bhakti. The whole Western world, there's no varnashram, they take to bhakti. So without any qualification of varnashram, they take to bhakti. So it doesn't depend on varnashram system or karma yoga. In jnana, there is some dependence on karma. They say that first you go through karma yoga and purify yourself. Fulfill your desires according to rules and regulations, and sacrifices and whatever you do, and studying the Vedas and all this. When you become purified, and then you get fed up with all these material enjoyments that you get from punyas, then you take to jnana. So you can only be qualified for jnana by previously doing karma yoga. Not so at bhakti. It does not require qualifications of previous karma yoga or whatever. So even the most sinful person could begin the process of bhakti. Even the person excluded from the varnashram system can practice bhakti. The person with no knowledge can practice bhakti. So it's completely independent of all other processes. And the result comes without these other processes. In fact, the other processes can interfere with the result. And then we have mixed bhakti. We mix a lot of karma yoga with bhakti, it can become karma mixed with Mr. Bhakti. The elements are there, and they can begin to affect our goal, weaken the goal, because we also have material goals involved with it. Becomes at the same time, we can mix the elements without the desires, and that's permissible. So you can do some of the, follow the rules and regulations of our ashram system, simultaneously practice bhakti as long as it's not contrary to bhakti, and don't have any material desires along with that. And then, okay, you can do that. So we can take favorable elements from karma yoga or jnana yoga or even ashtanga yoga, favorable elements, and use those along with the bhakti. No problem, as long as we don't have those desires for material desires, liberation, or cities, or anything else involved in it. So, we have karma yoga. If there's no worship of the Lord at all, it is useless. You don't even get svargaloka. You have a little bit of bhakti in the form of recognizing Vishnu as supreme and Devata as the service, but basically you're doing all the other worship also. You also worship the Supreme Lord. Then you can get the svargaloka. So this means that karma yoga is dependent on bhakti yoga. Ultimately, there's a small amount of bhakti, at least recognition of the Lord is there. So you can get svargaloka. Jnana yoga, without recognition of the Lord, will not give liberation. If they recognize the Lord, that amount of bhakti is there, and worship a little bit, then they can get liberation. So jnana is also dependent upon bhakti to get the result, liberation, which they desire. So other processes are dependent on bhakti. Bhakti is independent. Bhakti yoga can give you svargaloka if you want it. It can give you liberation if you want it. It also gives you spiritual world and spiritual body and prema. So it gives everything. Without having to practice karma yoga, you can get svargaloka also. Without practicing jnana yoga along with bhakti yoga, you can get liberation. And you get liberation if you go to the spiritual world, obviously liberated, no more birth and death. In fact, if you go to the spiritual world, you get more than svargaloka. Since the planet's svargaloka is temporary. Spiritual world is permanent. But you get more wealth, you get more enjoyment, in one sense, in the spiritual world than in the material world, anywhere, even in Brahmaloka. So whatever results you get from svargaloka or liberation, you also get from bhakti, but you get in a higher form. also have different mixtures here. For instance, we can take the bottom one there, and we can increase the pink section of bhakti more and 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 more. And we can decrease the karma yoga section until we get over half bhakti. So you're doing more bhakti and less karma. Then we can call it bhakti yoga. It's not karma yoga anymore, it's bhakti yoga, when there's more pink and less blue. But it's called mixed bhakti. It's not called pure bhakti because of this mixture of elements. Now I said it could be either good or bad. If we mix the desire is also there for material enjoyment, that karma Mr. Bhakti is not good. If we just do the angas of that karma yoga, but we don't have any material desires attached to it, we do it because they're favorable to our development of bhakti. So it's follow varnashram system, that's brahmacharya, for instance. Then, okay, that's favorable. So that element of varnashram is okay. So mixed bhakti is not necessarily bad as long as you don't have the desires mixed in there, material desires or desires for liberation. If you take the angas and mix it in, fine. Even though there's a mixture, you can still get the highest result as long as there's no attachment to those particular angas of karma yoga or jnana yoga. Okay. Okay. Anyway, the highest position is this. Bhakti with no other desires and with no other angas. That's the purest form of all. So bhakti is independent also of purity or impurity. In other systems you need purity. Even in karma yoga you need purity. So if you do a sacrifice, then you have to wash yourself, you have to have clean utensils, clean ingredients, so much time has to be proper, etc. There's an aspect of purity. Qualified persons by birth have to do the yajna, etc. If you do jnana, again, purity is necessary. Only a sattva brahmana is qualified to do it. And then you can only study at certain times, which are pure. He has to be in a pure condition. Study place has to be good, or whatever, like this. Same with the yogi. He has to sit in the asana in a certain place, in a forest, in a pure place, etc., and all this sort of thing. So there's all sorts of physical and mental considerations to do other processes. Not so with bhakti. Pure or impure. It can be practiced in some form or other. Of course, we do have limitations in deity worship, which is part of bhakti yoga. Then there is some conditions of purity and impurity. In chanting the holy name, there isn't. So if you're impure, you can chant the name and it has effect. If you're pure, it has effect. Either way. So bhakti is a much more flexible process. And we see that even the most sinful person can chant and get effect. And even if he doesn't have faith, as in the case of Ajamil, he gets result. Ajamil chanted the name of Narayan accidentally and he was sinful and he destroyed all his karmas. So even accidental bhakti has great effect. Yeah, for most sinful people even. So therefore we should not think that bhakti is restricted and that only sinless people practice. No, sinful people also can take to it and get good results. Of course, then we do have some restrictions on that because we have aparads, ISKCON aparad at the same time. So if you are very sinful and you practice bhakti and then you commit the aparad, committing strength and sin and the strength of the holy name, that becomes aparad and then no effect. Okay, so you have to be careful how the sinful people practice also. So whether you're disturbed or undisturbed, you practice. You cannot do that in jnana and yoga. If your mind is disturbed, no more meditation, nothing. You can't do it. In bhakti, even if you're disturbed, you can chant Hare Krishna, it's okay. So any place, any time is okay. It's not a problem. That's not so with anything else. The jnana, yoga, and karma all require particular times and particular places. So bhakti is independent of time, place, qualification by varna or ashrama, purity or impurity. Everything is completely independent. Varnas and ashramas are very dependent on conditions. And persons are qualified according to conditions. They're stuck in that certain condition for their life, more or less. So the Sudra's stuck in a Sudra condition, and he has to practice as a Sudra and do certain activities, not do other activities. Brahman is doing his particular activities. He's stuck in those activities also. He cannot descend into the other realms, otherwise he gets contaminated. Okay? So everyone is in the Varnashram system, you're fixed in certain categories of conditions, material conditions. But bhakti is beyond that. It's beyond varnas and ashramas completely. And it's not even dependent on faith. Generally say faith is the beginning of bhakti, but in one sense, accidental bhakti, or bhakti avas or namavas, has effect. It doesn't have the highest effect. You cannot get prem by this, but at least it will have some effect as destroying karmas. So it is said that by chanting once the name of Narayan, when Ajamil named his son Narayana, I will call you Narayana. Narayana is my son's name. Immediately all of his karmas, past, present, and futures were destroyed. So that is the power of bhakti, and particularly the holy name, that even unconsciously applied, it can have great effect. This, of course, destruction of karmas is nothing, in other words, for the process of bhakti. And therefore liberation also is nothing, because if he destroyed all his karmas, he's qualified for liberation. He's not qualified for Vaikuntha, however, simply by chanting accidentally. Ajamil went to Vaikuntha only after he practiced bhakti sincerely. He went to Haridwar, he met devotees, and he practiced bhakti. Then he was, through that, he did not accidental bhakti, but intentional bhakti, pure bhakti. And then he was qualified for Vaikuntha. But even without faith, if bhakti is accidentally performed, then you get some very, very great results. Okay. In this way, Vishwanath Chakravarti has glorified the process of bhakti, as being non-different from the Supreme Lord. Whatever power is in the Supreme Lord is also in bhakti. Bhakti comes from the Supreme Lord, it is his Sarup Shakti, and his Sarup Shakti is non-different from himself, Chit Shakti. So the Lord is all-pervading, the Lord is all full of knowledge, the Lord is independent, he's self-manifesting. Bhakti is exactly the same. So it is a most powerful process. Yeah. So Bhakti and Krishna are not different. Fine. That's the first section. I think it's Prachadam Patna.
Badaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shri Madhurya Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswata Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishunyavari Pastatya Deshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the work is divided into 8 parts, discussing the different levels of bhakti, different stages of bhakti, and they're all called showers or vrishti, because it's a rain cloud. So this is the second shower, the first stage of growth of bhakti once the seed is planted. So the seed was planted through devotees. They said the Madhyamadikari is the one who plants the seed of bhakti. And then it begins to grow. So, in sadhana bhakti, we have 2 qualities manifesting. These are covered in the Nectar Devotion also. 6 qualities of bhakti are there. The first 2 manifest in sadhana bhakti, the second 2 in bhava bhakti, and the last 2 in prem bhakti. So 6 qualities. Sadhana bhakti manifests 2 qualities, kleshagni and subhada. Kleshagni means destruction of suffering and the causes of suffering. Subodha means the appearance of good qualities. So we have a negative and a positive element here. So, according to yoga, Patanjali, there are 5 causes of suffering. The most subtle or the original cause is avidya or ignorance. Ignorance means mistaking one thing for another. So we mistake the impermanent body for permanent. Yeah? We mistake something in the material world which is full of misery to be full of bliss. We mistake things which aren't the self to be the self, etc. So it's all illusion, avidya. And that's the original cause. Then we got asmita, which means thinking oneself falsely, false ego in other words, ahankara, identifying ourselves with the body as a result of the ignorance. And as a result of that we get raga, attachment to certain objects and attachment to certain types of happiness in the material world. And we get the counterpart of that, dvesha or hatred. We do not like certain objects or we hate certain objects because they don't give the happiness or they give the opposite, which we call pain or unhappiness. The final result is abhinivesh. We develop a longing to cling to our particular life to get our happiness and destroy our suffering, etc. And we fear death. So these are the 5 causes of suffering. Like that. So under avidya we have false identity, attraction, repulsion, absorption, and then we do activities in the material world and we get karma. And karma gives suffering. So in Nectar Devotion he simply analyzes avidya, pap bija, which is the desire, like raga, and then karma. Karma itself is divided into 4 sections: aprabdha, rudha, bija, and prarabdha. Aprabdha is the most subtle. You don't experience it in this lifetime. Prarabdha, you experience in this lifetime. The other 2 are in between stages. So the rudha can be grouped with the aprabdha and the bija with the prarabdha. Like that. So any particular act will give a result in the future, but it won't manifest immediately. It may take 1 birth or 2 births or 5 births or 10 births. Until it manifests in one lifetime, it is aprabdha and rudha. And when it begins to manifest in this lifetime, it becomes bija and prarabdha. So, the first 2 stages you will not detect at all because it's for future lifetimes. The last 2 are this lifetime. Prarabdha means now you experience. Bija means somewhere else in this lifetime, future of this lifetime experience. So it is not as subtle as the first 2 stages, because it's somewhat detectable in this lifetime. So sometimes people have premonitions of future disaster or whatever in their life, accident or whatever. So that's the bija operating. Its presence isn't known, and then it will become prarabdha at a certain point in time due to karma. So, and what does bhakti do? Bhakti removes all of these. Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesh, action, karma, suffering. All levels of suffering from the... This gives the suffering, and then we go backwards all the way up to avidya. So all of that is removed by the process of bhakti. So, that's what the negative aspect, what it removes. Then it also produces something. In itself,
that removal of all that other stuff is not so significant. If we were simply to remove everything up to avidya, we would get liberation only. So in itself, this removal of sin and karma, etc., is not so significant. Because with jnana also you end up with that result, or yoga you can end up with that result also. So that's not what's so unique. There is a unique feature here in that jnana will not claim to remove the prarabdha karmas. So whatever you're stuck with in this lifetime remains in spite of your jnana. Only when you give up your body, then you get free from your prarabdhas also. Where bhakti says even you get rid of your prarabdhas now. The counter argument would be, well, your body is a prarabdha karma, and if you take to bhakti, how come you still have a body? You should leave your body immediately if all your prarabdhas are destroyed. So the answer to that is that there is no prarabdha, even for ajami or anybody like that. Technically, there is no prarabdha even for namabhas, but the body's there. Why? So that is not really karma. It's the will of the Lord. Yeah, it's a shadow of karma, kept there by the Lord. So it's not real karma as such. Okay, so we have subhada, bestowing auspiciousness. So subha means qualities, but it means spiritual qualities. But because if you were to get material qualities, it would be a cause of bondage, and you're back into all these things, asmita, etc. So development of qualities means spiritual qualities, not material qualities. And one becomes disinterested in material affairs, etc. We saw that Kleshagni removed desires, etc. So one becomes disinterested in material activities, etc. And interest in the Supreme Lord begins to manifest. So these are opposites. Attachment to material enjoyment, attachment to the Supreme Lord. They're opposites. So the more we engage in bhakti, the more we become disinterested in matter, and the more we become attached to the Supreme Lord. And automatically those two things happen together. And qualities like mercy, forgiveness, truthfulness, simplicity, etc., all these qualities begin to manifest. But these are not sattvic qualities which people manifest in the material world and cultivate in sattva gun. They're not the same thing. In Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami says cultivating good qualities is not an anga of bhakti. We don't try to cultivate good qualities. Because then you're stuck in the sattva gun as a result. So these qualities manifest spiritually as a result of bhakti. So when it says the devotee is simple, truthful, etc., 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 we're not supposed to cultivate qualities like that artificially. We're supposed to cultivate bhakti, which will manifest these qualities. That's all. So therefore, we should be very careful. Some people preach like that. We have to develop all these nice qualities like this, but actually it's not so. Of course, it also doesn't mean that let us do all sorts of sinful activities and wait for bhakti to develop our good qualities. We can't do that either. So we do have to have some standards and minimum and try to, control the senses. But the force of bhakti itself will manifest qualities. So we're planting the seed of bhakti and we're getting subhada and kleshagni manifesting in sadhana bhakti. So it starts with shraddha, or faith. In the Bhakti Sandarbha, there Jiva Goswami distinguishes faith from bhakti. So faith is only an inclination towards the Lord. It becomes bhakti when we actually decide to act upon that inclination and do something, such as the angas of bhakti, etc. Then it becomes bhakti. But it is the basis of the bhakti. Without that inclination to the Lord, if we do the activity, it's not called bhakti. So you can hear, chant, remember, it's not necessarily bhakti if you don't have faith. So in other words, if you're doing bhakti for some other reason, not for surrender to the Lord, then it's not actually bhakti. Even if you hear and chant, remembering, do all these things, it's not bhakti actually.
So it's based upon that inclination towards the Lord. That inclination is not mental. Huh? Because mind keeps changing all the time. Huh? So where does bhakti reside? Primarily in the Atma, not in the mind, intelligence, ego, etc. In the Atma. So the inclination of Shraddha is a change in the Atma itself. The Jiva changes his inclination. When that takes place a little bit, then that is called Shraddha. Enough to be conscious, and it's called Shraddha. The cause of that, of course, is mercy of devotees. Madhyamadikaris give some mercy, birth after birth after birth. The person has no faith, therefore he will not look for devotees. So only accidentally he gets association, and he doesn't even want to accept it, but somehow it affects him. It affects the jiva, the atma. Birth after birth that happens until it becomes shraddha. Then it becomes conscious. When it becomes a conscious element, then he uses his body, mind, words, etc., and he will seek out sadhu sangha, association of devotees. Then he begins bhajana kriya, activities of bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering. So that is actual bhakti at that point. After the shraddha, when we get sadhu sangha, then we get actual performance of bhakti. The first stage is called anishtata, which means unsteady. So, talk about faith again. Shraddha. So, that Shraddha is manifested as faith in Scripture. We have an inclination towards the Lord. What is its manifestation as far as devotee is concerned? We accept what Scripture says. Scripture says, Bhagavad Gita will say, you're not the body, you're the soul, soul of servant of Krishna. So we accept that. We don't argue with it. So that's our faith. We accept the verdict of Scripture. Which Scripture? The Bhakti Scriptures. Those things which are dedicated to the Supreme Lord. Once we accept the principle of the Scripture, Scripture also gives us instructions on what to do. In other words, Scripture defines truth in terms of jiva, Supreme Lord, material energy, etc. This is the Sambandha Gyan. It defines a process and a goal. These are all defined. So with faith we accept all that and we don't argue with it. Then Bhakti, the Scripture will tell us the process to get to the goal. So Shraddha means we accept the Scripture and we also accept the process. That is, process of Bhakti Yoga. So, these types of faith may arise naturally or suddenly. Naturally meaning over time, and that is association and accidental mercy, birth after birth, and suddenly in this lifetime it gradually begins to manifest. Or suddenly a person may manifest some great faith for some reason or other. What this means is either great mercy suddenly, or actually there were some previous blocks, and suddenly one becomes free of those blocks and it manifests. But it was actually there in previous lifetime. Okay, so sadhu sangha means taking shelter of spiritual master, guru, devotees, etc. And the person with faith then inquires what to do. What is the action we should do? Which is in the Scripture, of course, but then he asks the devotee what to do. So in other words, it's not just the book. We have instances of people just reading books and starting to practice bhakti. Like in, I think, Mongolia, somebody got some books. There was no devotees there. They read the book to get them interested, so they started chanting and doing all sorts of things completely independently. Of course, we don't know if they're chanting properly, even because they didn't have any examples of devotees to how to chant on the beads or anything. So they started chanting and everything. So generally, it requires some devotee there to guide the person, so they do it properly. In other words, maybe they're chanting with their left hand, or we don't know. Or maybe they're not using beads at all, they're chanting in the mind, you know, because sometimes we just read the book and it says chant Hare Krishna, so they start chanting in their mind or whatever. So we don't know. But so you take shelter of devotees and they give you all the details of exactly how to do things properly, not just book. Okay. Then that person takes instruction and he understands the value of association, sadhu sangha. So there's different types of sadhu sangha, association with devotees. With equals, one associates as friend. So equal interchange ideas. Superiors, then one takes shelter of them. In other words, one follows their instructions. If it's inferior, then one gives instructions. And if they're not devotees, you avoid them. If they're neutral, you can preach to them. So there's different modes of conduct for a devotee and in relation to other types of devotees. So as I mentioned, that sadhu sangha leads to the bhajana kriya, and we have two types, anishtha and nishta, unsteady and steady. So generally, it starts as anishtha and then it leads to steady. In very rare cases, we just go to shraddha sadhu sangha nishta also, but usually it goes to an anishtha stage. So anishtha bhakti has symptoms. False confidence, utsahamai. Utsaha, of course, is a good quality. It means enthusiasm and the nectar of instruction. And be enthusiastic and optimistic about the getting some results in bhakti. But here utsahamai means it's a negative thing, and it's a false sense of confidence. In other words, the person who begins bhakti feels that he is at a very high platform when he's at a very low platform. So now that he's a devotee, he will look down on everybody else as being inferior, and all the karmis are rascals and everything like this. And he's almost at their level, but he will consider everybody else to be like rascals and everything like that. And other devotees also, he'll consider himself high or equal to them, even he's not. So that's utsahamai, false position. Thinking, because of course he is very fortunate, he is higher than everybody else in the material world because he's taken to bhakti, but he should not falsely elevate himself. So that's one thing. Other is the sporadic endeavor. Sometimes we do very nicely, sometimes we don't have any inclination to do it all. Sometimes enthusiastic, sometimes not enthusiastic, like this, up and down. Often controlled by circumstances. Bad circumstances, then we go enthusiastic. When there's good association, then we get enthusiastic again. So we go up and down because we cannot control our circumstances in all cases. The Sanskrit is gana tarala. Tarala means very thin, gana means very intense. So sometimes very intense bhakti, sometimes very dilute bhakti. So it's inconstant endeavor. Indecision, called vyuda vikalpa, which means we make all sorts of decisions about everything, aspirations, but we keep switching. So one day we may think it's good to take sannyas, another day it's good to be a grihasta, another day this, that, you know, we keep switching our goals all the time. So we don't really have any firm determination. We switch around all the time. It's called vyuda vikalpa. Oops, I can't see it too much. Vishaya sangra, which means war with vishaya, material attractions. A struggle with Maya. So this struggle means sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes the senses overcome you and you take to sense gratification. Sometimes you win and you control your senses, like this. So this is anishtha person. Sometimes he does what he should do, sometimes he doesn't do what he should do. He does the opposite. Struggle. niyama akshama, which means inability to hold vows. These are the positive vows we have. Of course, we have 4 regular principles, etc. We have other vows like chanting 16 rounds, etc. So many things. Or you make some vow, I'll read 1 hour scripture a day, or so many things. But then the anishtata person doesn't actually maintain that vow. He makes a vow, and then 2 days later, he's broken it. He stops decreasing his rounds or whatever, or he doesn't read or whatever. So he makes vows and then breaks the vows. And enjoying the waves, taranga rangani. The waves are the waves of material enjoyment. So these waves, something like Vishya Sangara, of course, but the waves are actually the benefits that one gets due to following bhakti. So when one does bhakti, then naturally bhukti becomes a servant. Bhukti and mukti are servants of bhakti. So therefore, one will get opportunities for material enjoyment, for followers, so many things. So if you begin enjoying those things, that's called taranga rangani, to enjoy the results that you get from bhakti, and the material effects, that is, that arise. So these manifest in the anishtata devotee. What this means is that he still becomes attracted to material things, and the spiritual influence is weak, so therefore he cannot follow the vows properly. So there's a struggle there. Okay, so anyway, we have the mercy of Lord Chaitanya to protect us from that anishtata stage. So that's the second one. Next. Okay, so now we're at the third shower. So we start out with anishtata bhakti. We begin process of bhajana kriya, and then it's anishtata, and then we go through anartha nivritti, destroying the anarthas. So this will gradually lead us to nishtata bhakti. So this is an intermediate stage between anishta and nishta, anartha nivritti. Of course, we should not think that anartha nivritti ends when we get to nishta. No, it continues all the way up into bhava. In one sense, some anarthas will be there up into bhava stage even. So it will continue, but this is the major portion between anishtata and nishta bhakti. So we have anartha nivritti, destruction of the impurities. So Vishnu Chakravarti analyzes 4 types of anarthas arising from previous sinful activity as karma results. What is the result of karmas, sinful karmas? Suffering of various sorts, sickness, no money, so many things. So these are karmic results, which can act as anarthas for us, obstacles for us. Health, for instance. So that becomes an anartha. You can't, because you're bad health, then you can't do bhakti properly. No money, poverty, you got to work too hard, then you can't do bhakti, whatever, something like that. So sinful activity will lead to certain obstacles in bhakti. Arises from previous pious activities. Well, usually we don't think of that as an obstacle, but of course it can be, because then you enjoy too much in this lifetime. Without working, you get a lot of money, then you start enjoying that, and then your bhakti becomes less because of that. So that's also, punya results are also an obstacle to bhakti. Arising from offenses. So this has got nothing to do with karma at all, but in the performance of bhakti, we do aparads. This will create anartha, blocks. And we have impediments arising to bhakti. When we perform it imperfectly, certain things can become obstacles to us, weeds in devotional service, as a result of the bhakti itself, not as a result of karma in previous lifetime or aparads, but we do the bhakti in a certain way, it creates obstacles also. So, sinful and activities, of course, we get the different varieties of kleshas. And the karmas, all of this, the karmas, aparabdha, parabdha, etc., all that, we get the desires behind that, etc. So they produce new actions, etc. This is one type of anartha. The other is, of course, the previous pious activity,
we get sattva and sense enjoyment, and this can act as an obstacle because then we don't want to do bhakti anymore. Like in higher planets, it's not so favorable because they have too much sattva, and therefore their bhakti becomes a little bit diluted because of that. So that was, we've had this previously. And then we have actually karma is sin and piety, both are obstacles. They're both bondage, and they become anartha for us. Aparads, we have different types of aparads, but the serious aparad is nam-aparads. We have seva aparads to the deity, like walking in the deity room with your shoes on or arguing in front of the deity. These are called seva aparads, but these are not so serious. The nam-aparads are the serious aparads. So, of course, that is two forms, unconscious or accidental and intentional. Of the two, the intentional is very serious. Unintentional, we cannot really help it all the time. We have to be careful, but we cannot help it all the time. So, unconscious, we just chant and whatever, do our bhakti process constantly, that removes it. Conscious aparad is difficult to remove and takes a long time to get rid of. So this one particularly, one has to be very careful. So what happens is the intentional aparad actually creates a big obstacle mentally. And what is an aparad? It's a negative attitude towards bhakti and towards devotees, towards bhakti scriptures, etc. So this prevents favorable influence of sadhu sangha, etc. from accessing that devotee. So he becomes isolated. Because negative. Don't like, rejecting everything. So this creates more or less a shell around him, so it prevents mercy from getting to him. So that's why it becomes serious, because sadhu sangha has not much effect on that person because of his aparad. So therefore, he simply lives by himself more or less, and gets no influence of bhakti or devotee association or anything. And even chanting the holy name can't get through the shell. Influence is very dilute. Unintentional aparad creates a little bit of an obstacle, but not so much. Vishnu Chakravarti analyzes a few of the aparads, not all of the nam-aparads, just a few of them. Animosity towards the Vaishnavas, sadhu ninda, literally criticism of the sadhu or the Vaishnava. This is considered to be one of the serious ones because the Vaishnava is the source of mercy, and that mercy manifests as the seed of bhakti. And then we get sadhu sangha. So the shraddha that's produced by the association, again, is nourished into bhakti by association with devotees. So if we offend the devotee, we cut ourselves off from the very root of our bhakti. So this becomes very serious. Of course, we can say, well, I offend this devotee, but not that devotee. But we can't rely on that argument because Krishna may take it differently. One devotee is equal to the other, so if you offend one devotee, you're offending all devotees. Krishna may take it like that. So therefore, we have to be very careful in Vaishnava aparad because it can affect bhakti profoundly. What is the remedy? Repentance. We have to sincerely regret the offense, apologize to the person personally, and give proper respect to that person. And hopefully that person will also forgive the person. One may argue, well, the Vaishnava's not upset, so it doesn't matter. But Vishnu Chakravarti says that, he quotes from Bhagavatam, there's a verse I think in relation to Shiva and Daksha or something. He says the dust from the feet of the Vaishnava will give the result of aparad. So even if that person is not offended, somehow or other the effect will come on that person. Of course, we say behind it, Krishna is upset, so Krishna will create some obstacle for the person. So even if the person is not upset, but you committed a conscious aparad particularly, then the effect will come. It doesn't matter.
So, and what is the effect? The effect of aparad is that bhakti decreases, and in some cases is destroyed. So whatever you worked for over many lifetimes, vagata sukriti, to get faith, and then whatever you work for again to build up your bhakti, may disappear completely. And then you end up as a jiva with no inclination to the Lord at all. And you just wander around the world for another 1,000,000 years or so, and then eventually you maybe get some accidental mercy again. So it's very unfortunate if that happens. In some cases, it may happen like that. In other cases, maybe just a decrease of the bhakti. And particularly if it is accidental, then you may just get the accidental decrease. As we see in the case of, Rupa Goswami accidentally offended the Vaishnava by laughing, but didn't mean to laugh at a person, and then his enthusiasm for bhajana decreased. And he was wondering why. It's nothing Goswami, it must have been aparad. That's the only thing that can decrease your, enthusiasm and bhakti is aparad. Otherwise it should increase all the time. So therefore aparad very serious. So what happens if the Vaishnava doesn't accept the apology? Then there's no recourse but just simply chant continuously. That's all you can do. And if one chants and does not apologize, that's a further offense. So you have to actually go to the person to apologize, and you can't make the excuse, no, well, it doesn't matter, he doesn't take offense anyway. So, and if one says, well, he's got faults anyway, so it doesn't matter if we criticize him, then one commits offense also. So we have to be very careful. Misunderstanding the position of Vishnu, second aparada, thinking that Vishnu is like a devata or Krishna. So the Supreme Lord is independent. He is not inferior or equal to anybody. He is above everyone else. Shiva is also like Vishnu because he is Ishvara. So he is independent, but he's also not the same as Vishnu because he associates more with the gunas, and he associates particularly with tamagun. So therefore, the qualities of Vishnu do not manifest in the same degree as in Vishnu. Definitely has different qualities because he's more than the jiva by 5 qualities, but Vishnu manifests 5 more qualities. So there is a difference between Vishnu and Shiva, even though they're both called Ishvara. Sometimes jiva also takes the position of Shiva, in which case he's completely different, and therefore not equal to the Supreme Lord at all. Brahma is usually a jiva, empowered, so he's quite distinct from the Supreme Lord. Sometimes the Lord may also take that position. In any case, we understand there's a distinction between Supreme Lord and jivas, and also between Supreme Lord and even Shiva. So we don't say they're equal. So to say they're equal becomes offense. So this is the matter of accepting the conclusion of Scripture. We don't know on our own, so we only have to take what's said in Scripture. Unfortunately, some people may get the wrong faith, the wrong faith in the wrong Scriptures. So when we define faith, it is faith in Bhakti Scriptures and their conclusions, not faith in Shiva Purana or something else, or Tantra or whatever. So we have to have faith in the conclusions of the Bhakti Scriptures. That will prevent this. So here we have the categories. We should not think that they are equal in any way. The third one is Shruti Shastra Ninda, to criticize the Shastra, and particularly the Shruti, which means Vedas. Generally, we say that devotees probably won't be subject to this aparad, because we understand that sabda is higher than other pramanas. But we may start criticizing karma kanda or gyan kanda, which is also shruti. So that's also a type of ninda. So we should not criticize them. We understand that they are inferior, but they're also shruti. So they're not different from the Lord also. So we understand that they are directions given by the Lord, non-different from the Lord, but they're also inferior instructions given for certain purposes, that's all. So we don't criticize them, but we understand their place Karma leads to jnana, jnana leads to bhakti. So we understand they're not ultimate. So if we commit that offense, then the remedy is to praise the Shruti, give proper respect to Shruti and the followers and whatever, and chant the holy name. Okay. So we had the aparads, yeah? We had, and previous to that we had the papan punya anarthas. Now we have anarthas arising from bhakti. So, when we cultivate bhakti, then it is said that you can get material assets, worship, respect from other persons, fame, position, so many material things. So, if one becomes attracted to these things, this becomes anartha. So previously we had Trangarangani, which is attraction to the waves of Maya. So this is one aspect of that. This develops in an anishtata devotee. So this can become anartha. So we develop it's a weed in devotional service. So it's not arising by karma, but as a result of our bhakti, we get certain attractions. So these are removed at different stages and different degrees. We have Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, then we have Bhajana Kriya, Nishta, Ruchi, Sakti Bhava, Prema, and then going to the spiritual world, which is the Siddha stage. So, the Papan Punya Anarthas are destroyed at a Sakti stage, end of a Sakti, they're all gone. And that means the karmas are all gone by that stage. The obstacles due to karmas are gone. So it starts in the Bhajana Kriya, a little bit, gets more as we get to the Nishta stage, and then through Ruchi, and then a Sakti, then all the karmic obstacles get removed by end of a Sakti. Bhakti, the faults in Bhakti, which is the last one we discussed, getting attraction to material assets or something. That happens a little quicker. So by end of Ruchi, all of that is gone. Because Ruchi means we have quite a strong taste for the Lord. So obviously if we have a taste for the Lord, then our attraction for material things would be less. So all the things that arise in Bhakti, we become disinterested in, assets, position, etc. But we see here that the aparad is very pervasive. It starts getting removed in Bhajana Kriya, a little more in Nishta, but even in Bhava, it can influence. Prema, it should be gone, but the problem is that one could commit accidental aparads in prema when one's in the material world. Like we see Rupa Goswami commits unintentional aparad against the sadhu or whatever like that. So there could be unintentional ones even as long as we have prema and we're in the material world, accidentally, but not intentionally, of course. Now only free state is in spiritual world. Then there's no influence at all, accidental or whatever. In any case, the stage of bhava is, in the stage of bhava, finally, the final stage of the bhava, most of it is gone. But there is a slight obstacle even in bhava, so that one can even fall from the position of bhava due to influence of aparads. So that is the case of Bharat. It is said because he had done a previous aparad, therefore he forgot Vishnu and became attracted to the deer. And he was in bhava stage because he had sattvika symptoms, sattvika bhava symptoms. So, in bhava stage, the effects of aparad, previous aparads can influence and cause disturbance, even in this bhava stage. Okay. So of these ones we see, the aparad actually is the most serious one. This is the one that's the most tenacious and kind of holds on to you. The other ones get destroyed more quickly. But it's the aparad one, which is kind of sticks and influences even up into bhava stage.
It was very difficult to remove. So if we analyze this in terms of the stages, we see that the anartas and aparadhas are gradually destroyed as we go from faith all the way through asakti. Yeah? So by the end of asakti, anartas in general, like due to karmas, are gone. But still, after bhava, into bhava stage, the aparadha section still, influence is still there. And then when we get to prema, then it's pure. Any question about this diagram? You understand what it means? So it's a gradual decrease of anartas and a gradual increase of the bhakti. The two things coincide. And in the middle we get nishta, which is kind of half-half. And before that, less bhakti, more anarta. After that, less anarta, more bhakti. So it's a gradual increase of bhakti due to the cultivation of bhakti. Automatically, other things begin decreasing. The anartas and aparadhas decrease, decrease, decrease. Huh? It happens simultaneously. So we go through anarta vritti and remove the karmas and everything else, anartas, all this, and we get to nishta, steadiness. The word nishta actually is found in the Bhagavatam, where we have these verses, like here's the first verse, Srinvatam Svakada Krishna Punya Sravana Kirtana Haryanta Stokya Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhrit Satam. So Krishna, who purifies by the process of hearing and chanting, who is the benefactor of the devotees who hear about him, enters the hearts of the devotees and destroys their sin. This is anarjana vritti, destruction of sin. Nasta Pradesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Naishtiki, Nishta. That's where the word Nishta comes from, Naishtiki. So you go through anarjana vritti and you get to Nishta Bhakti. As the impediments to bhakti become gradually destroyed by constant service to the devotees and the Bhagavatam, the stage of Nishchita Bhakti to Bhagavan, who is praised by the great sages, becomes established. So we go from anarjana vritti, we go to Nishta Bhakti, steady Bhakti. So we saw previously that Anishta Bhakti had certain qualities like Gana Taralata and Vishaya Sangara and Taranga Rangani, Utsahamai. So unsteadiness generally and uncontrolled senses. And sometimes doing, sometimes not doing. It's unsteady bhakti. So in Nishta, there is absence of certain unsteady qualities. Absence of loya. Loya means sleep. It actually literally means destruction, like pralaya. And pralaya is a big destruction, and then Vishnu goes to sleep. So laya means sleep. So in the beginning stages, obviously, then there will be a tendency to sleep. And in Nishtita Bhakti, then the tendency to sleep vanishes. So there's alertness while doing bhakti. Vikshepa means this agitation of the mind. You cannot keep the mind under control. It's always thinking this and that, whatever. So that is absent in Nishta. One is able to concentrate. When we chant and do our activities, we can concentrate on our service, concentrate on the Supreme Lord. And we avoid interpretation, speculating about what is Krishna, the name of Krishna, etc. Absence of pratipatti, which means indifference, indifference to chanting. So we may not be sleepy, we may not be distracted in mind, but still we just can't do anything. You just sit there. That's the indifference. So we give up indifference and we become positively attracted to the process of bhakti and chanting the holy name. Kshaya means sinful habits. So in Nishta stage, then that tendency for sinful habits and other things, all these anartas, becomes much, much less. It's not completely eradicated because it's only a half-half condition, half maya, half bhakti, but at least with the bhakti part, it's able to control all this, so this is under control. Previously, it may appear, so therefore we get Vishaya Sangara and all these things coming up in Nishita Bhakti. Rasa Svad. This rasa is the wrong rasa. This is the rasa for material enjoyment. So that disappears with nishta. There's enough bhakti taste to suppress or keep under control the material portion. So, as I said, the impurities are there, but they do not cause obstruction. So one can do steady bhakti, and it doesn't go up and down like this as in anishtata bhakti. It's steadiness. So this is a favorable stage because the anarthas are decreased to a certain amount where they do not obstruct the process of bhakti itself or the influence of sadhu sangha, etc. That can penetrate very nicely to the atma. So it's a very positive stage. Before that, as I said, there's these layers, and then there's the aparadhs there, etc. So that can cause a lot of problems. When we get to, after anartha nivritti, we get to nishta, then the anarthas are at a very weak stage, so therefore it's much easier to practice. So basically it's a 50-50, half-half, but because bhakti is stronger, therefore we're able to maintain steadiness. And as I said, impurities actually go in bhava stage, the late bhava stage. Only the remainder there is the effects of aparadhs in the bhava stage, but otherwise the karmas, everything are gone. So this anartha nivritti is taking place even after nishta. More anarthas are removed up into a ruchi sakti into the bhava stage. Okay. Types of nishta. Steadiness in bhakti. Steadiness means nishta. So in bhakti itself, we develop steadiness in terms of body, mind, and words. In terms of the body, services that involve the body, we can be steady. And we're not disturbed by bodily urges, etc. Words. Our words are dedicated to the Lord rather than talking on material things. And mind, of course, then, we're thinking of Krishna more, and the material tendencies less. The other type of steadiness is, this steadiness actually allows us to appreciate and recognize steadiness in other devotees also. So therefore, a Nishta devotee will attract a Nishta devotee. They will tend to attract each other. Madhyam Adhikari, this is actually a good stage for the Madhyam Adhikari. He distinguishes devotees from non-devotees. He sees equal. So Nishta will see Nishta, and they develop friendship. And he will teach the Kanishtas, and he will serve the Uttamas. The other type of steadiness is steadiness in qualities, like humility, respect, friendliness, mercy, etc., which are actually secondary to the bhakti. So therefore, if we just get the qualities without the bhakti, that's not necessarily good. So the primary element is steadiness in the bhakti itself, and the principles and the activities of bhakti, and naturally the qualities follow. However, not always. You may have the steadiness in bhakti and the qualities may not all manifest properly. But that is better than having qualities without the bhakti. So therefore we cannot criticize the person. He's not having the proper humility, all this stuff, if his bhakti is steady. If it is unsteady and there's no qualities, of course that's a problem. But if you develop steadiness in bhakti, these qualities are not properly developed, then we should not really criticize, because we know that they should develop eventually anyway. Okay, so the difference in qualities. I said steadiness in qualities may be only a development of sattvic quality, which may be due to previous karmas that you got sattvic qualities and you appreciate a devotee for that. But if he hasn't got steadiness in bhakti, then that's not very useful actually. It may be a good appearance, but actually it's not proper because it's sattvic only, it's material. So spiritual qualities actually arise through bhakti and actually coming from Krishna. And they naturally develop with the process of bhakti. Okay, Nishta, finished. Okay, we're on the fifth shower, ruchi, or taste. This is after Nishta, after the halfway point. This means that there's an increase of taste for Krishna. Attraction to Krishna is more, attraction to Maya is less. So therefore, that obviously creates more of a dominant attitude of liking Krishna, etc. So it's called ruchi, the first stage. So the ruchi is in terms of the angas of bhakti. We have a taste for practicing bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering, deity worship, etc. We become more attracted to that, less attracted to material activities. And we don't feel tired when we do these activities. So this is a very favorable stage because very quickly from Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, these are very quick stages because we're going beyond the halfway point. And so once the taste is there, then that increases very rapidly. So it's a very wonderful stage. So this is about ruchi, or taste. So in the material world, we don't have taste for Krishna. We're in a diseased state, like the person who has the jaundice or liver defect. So therefore, when he tastes sugar, it doesn't taste good. So therefore, when we chant with material contamination, we're not attracted to Krishna. No ruchi for the name. No ruchi for Krishna. But we know that if you take the sugar, when you have the liver disease, gradually, in spite of the fact that it's distasteful to you and it's bitter, gradually you follow the rule and you keep taking it, then gradually your liver is cured and you begin to taste the sugar more and more and more until it becomes very sweet. So, similarly, we start chanting the name and it is, because we're materially attracted, it's not so attractive. By constantly chanting it, then gradually it loses its negative qualities for us, and gradually we begin to develop a taste for it. Huh? Okay, so the devotional process of hearing, chanting, and remembering, they are actually the medicine, so to speak, and they counteract the ignorance and other kleshas in us, and through these gradually, the taste begins to develop. So in the beginning it's not, but by the destruction of the kleshas, then the taste is allowed to develop. Okay. So as with nishta, we had different types of nishta in terms of bhakti and in terms of qualities or whatever. So at ruchi, you can have taste depending on the elements, which are actually more or less material. And they will judge kirtan or whatever in terms of its material aspects. I like this because it is very, singer's nice or whatever like this. We have material standards involved with our attraction to the bhakti angas. So that is an inferior type of ruchi due to impurity of heart. So a real ruchi does not depend on material elements at all. It depends on the devotion with which the kirtan is executed. So one appreciates the devotion. Well, even if it's not musical. So if we can appreciate the devotion of that person through the kirtan or whatever they're doing, then that is a real ruchi. So the person at ruchi stage laments his previous condition. In other words, now he's got some taste. When he has that taste, he realizes taste, then immediately understands the uselessness of all of his material attractions in the past. So he develops constant hearing and chanting as a result, rejects all material engagements because the material attraction is much less then, and the attraction to Krishna is more. So basically it's like this, more bhakti, less anartha. And in general, the devotees, if they take refuge at the Dham, they go to Vrindavan or Mayapur like that, and carry out their work, and they do their bhajana. Oh, that's quick. And then we go to Asakti. Okay, so we had the plant, the seed, and with the process of bhakti, it grows, and we had kleshagni and subhada, yeah, in sadhana bhakti. At the end of sadhana bhakti, and then little buds appear, flower buds appear. So this is Asakti stage. The plant of bhakti begins to get the little flowers coming out. So in comparison to ruchi, which is attraction for the bhajana, the process, hearing, chanting, remembering, that's the object of the taste. In asakti, Krishna becomes the object. It changes. It's not just the hearing, chanting, remembering. It's the Krishna in the hearing, chanting, remembering who becomes attractive. So not the process, it is Krishna who becomes the object here. And the increase is an increased attraction, more than in ruchi. And therefore constantly there's less attraction to Maya also. So obviously in ruchi there's also attraction to Krishna, but it's dominantly the process that we become attracted to. In asakti, the process is also there, obviously, with attraction, but it's Krishna within that process that we become attracted to. So in ruchi stage, we have to take effort to withdraw from matter and concentrate on Krishna. There's certainly more interest in Krishna, less in Maya, but still we have to pull the mind away. In asakti, spontaneously the mind will go to Krishna. So therefore that means the material attraction is much, much less, and it causes much less agitation. So spontaneously one can concentrate the mind on Krishna. So this means, of course, that the effect therefore is that very quickly one can advance from ruchi to asakti and then to bhava stage. And the reward is that it's not actual Krishna, but like a reflection of Krishna may appear in the heart. We don't have spiritual vision as such yet. That only happens in bhava stage. Krishna actually appears. So in asakti stage, we get like a reflection of the form of Krishna in the heart. So there's some aspect of experience of Krishna, but it's like a reflection at this stage. This, of course, increases the enthusiasm of the devotee. So Krishna appears in that person's heart a little bit to give reward. What are the characteristics? Very attractive to devotees and hearing about them. So sadhu sangha, very strong at this point. Sees everything in relation to attaining Krishna. How can I attain Krishna? And he sees everything favorable to that. Disregards others because everyone's going to say you're crazy. Why are you dedicating yourself to Krishna, etc. So he ignores all the critical people at this stage. So dedication is a little bit of anartha left there, very little. Because of this, he cannot relate to society anymore. No longer interested in any social conventions, and therefore they criticize. He's, completely indifferent, completely, unsocial or whatever. Doesn't talk to people, doesn't socialize with people at all. He's just thinking of Krishna all the time. Okay, so he sees everything in relation to Krishna then. So his only idea is to get closer and closer to Krishna, serve Krishna better. That's the bud, flower bud. Okay, seventh stage is the bhava stage. After asakti, we have bhava. So the bud was there in asakti, now it opens up, and we get a flower. It's called bhava or rati. In one sense, it's a stage of prema. It's the first stage of prema. It's called prema ankura, the bud of prema. So it's more or less a type of inferior prema. So in this stage, we get manifestation of the form of the Lord. Here's where one can actually see the Lord. Asakti, it was a reflection only. See, some brief reflection. And bhava, actually, there is the manifestation of the actual Lord, not a reflection anymore. Consequently, we get ananda. And when we get this bhava, avidya disappears. So ahankara, we had this whole thing, avidya, asmita, etc., on the kleshas. So all of the things, all the way up to avidya is removed at this stage. with all these things removed. How? If Krishna appears, it cannot exist. Krishna appears before you, then automatically everything else is gone. One has no other interest except Krishna. So all of this is finished. At this stage, the two other aspects of bhakti manifest, Sudurlabha and Moksha Lagu Kriti. Sudurlabha means very rare, which means that bhava cannot be attained by Gyanis and Karmis and Yogis, only by devotees going through these stages of Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, you get the bhava, and mercy of Krishna only. So practice itself does not guarantee getting to bhava and Krishna revealing himself. He'll only reveal himself when he wants to. So you can practice for 1,000,000 years. If he doesn't want to, he won't reveal himself. You don't get bhava. So it's up to the will of Krishna. I mean, that's why it's very rare. He does not submit to everyone. So therefore, bhava itself is rare. Bhakti in general is not rare, but bhava becomes rare because the Lord will appear to the devotee and serve the devotee. So he doesn't want to do that with everyone. And moksha luguta kriti, liberation, impersonal liberation becomes insignificant. Why? Because the devotee experiences ananda in relation to the Lord, and the bliss of moksha, that is Brahmananda, becomes useless at that stage. The bliss of bhakti is much more. So this is what happens. We get the bliss, we get liberation with destruction of avidya, but we go beyond liberation because we have a vision of the Lord which creates positive bliss. Liberation meaning the destruction of all the bad things. So that's the negative thing. The bliss of moksha is absence of birth, death, old age, and disease. Lamentation. Yeah? The bliss of bhava accomplishes that because avidya is destroyed, but the Lord appears. So that creates greater bliss, positive bliss. So avidya was destroyed. We saw in that diagram that anartha is due to karmas, anartha is due to bhakti over there, anartha is due to aparad was there. Huh? And the anarthas due to aparad remained even up into bhava stage. So in bhava, there's no more karmas left, but there's a little obstacle because of the effects of aparad. That little black thing on the end, there's a little bit of something there. So that's why it's not called prema, because there's this little obstacle there. And because of the little obstacle, rasa does not manifest fully. So the ananda is there, but it's not full ananda. So even though there is some little obstacle there, in the form of aparad, bhava attracts Krishna, so he might manifest himself by his mercy to that person. In Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami says, bhava is very rare. And therefore, even if the bhava bhakta has a fault, one cannot criticize that. Because he's a very rare person. So for that reason, we don't criticize Bharat for falling down. Yeah, he had a fault, but we don't criticize because he had attained bhava stage, which is very rare. And the Lord reveals himself to him. And the Lord will never forget that person. So generally, even if he falls, the Lord protects him, as he protected Bharat. So when he became Jat Bharat, then he got prema. So therefore, the Lord protects these devotees, even if they make mistakes and fall or whatever. So the devotee at this stage is very attracted to Krishna because there's very little obstacle and a little bit of that trace of aparad is there at that stage. So how does he see the Lord? Because he's developed spiritual senses, spiritual body, due to bhakti. If he performs jnana, he doesn't develop a spiritual body. He does not perceive Krishna. He just is consciousness, that's all. By the performance of bhakti, he develops spiritual body and develops spiritual senses. And therefore he can perceive the sweetness of Krishna through seeing, smelling, hearing, touching, tasting. And of course thinking. So, therefore the spiritual body manifests in bhava stage. So we do sadhana, 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 go through Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, and then in bhava, we see Krishna, and we also develop our spiritual form. Because we can only see Krishna if we got a form. We have to have eyes, not material eyes. So we have a spiritual form that sees Krishna also. So not only we see Krishna, we serve Krishna in a spiritual body. So that begins to develop in the bhava stage. So where does that body come from? Obviously, it's in the spiritual, not material, so it's from the spiritual world manifested. Now, there is, of course, a controversy about how to develop the spiritual body, because in Raganuga, you got Siddha Pranali, in which you get your spiritual body when you're doing in sadhana bhakti, nishta or ruchi or sakti. You get a body and you meditate on serving in that body. So that is one way of developing your spiritual body, through sadhana itself, concentrating on a certain form and serving in that form, and then in bhava, it manifests as a spiritual body actually, and sadhana it's not. So when you get your Siddha Deha and Raganuga Bhakti, it's not a spiritual body as such. It becomes spiritual in bhava and prema only. Yeah. So it's a sadhana in Raganuga Bhakti. In bhava Bhakti, it becomes actual spiritual body. So it is a practice to, and what type of spiritual body you attain? According to your practice. So if you practice worshiping Vishnu and Vaidhi Bhakti, then you get a four-handed Vishnu dude form ultimately. If you worship Krishna as a cowherd boy, worshiping Sakya Rasa, then you develop a cowherd body. If you worship as a Madhurya Rasa, as a Saki, you get a Saki body, etc. So depending on your sadhana, then your spiritual body develops in that particular relationship. This is bhava stage. So one is identifying with the spiritual body and relationship with Krishna. Material body is like useless at this stage. You neglect your body completely. It's like a shell only. Spiritual qualities, we saw the subhada, spiritual qualities, they manifest very, very prominently at this stage. They start in sadhana, and in bhava, they much, much more. And of course, kleshagni was taking place. Kleshagni was taking place in sadhana, and it's all gone. All the kleshas are gone in bhava stage when avidya itself is destroyed. Possessiveness of Krishna, mamata. This increases. This is a quite high stage. One has a complete attraction and a possessiveness of Krishna. Krishna is mine. Because of his absorption in Krishna, he appears insane. We saw in Asakti stage even, generally, he neglects society and society criticizes the person. In bhava stage, he's completely like an insane person because he doesn't relate with anybody. He's not even in his body most of the time. Body is lifeless. Oh, types of bhava. From Vaidhi Bhakti, you do Vaidhi Bhakti, Vaidhi Bhakti, Vaidhi Bhakti, through, Anarjana Vritti, Nishta Ruchi, Sakti Bhava. You get up to bhava through Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. This is considered to be weaker than going through Raganuga. It's less intense, the relationship in Vaidhi Bhakti. Because we're seeing Krishna as a very powerful entity and we are the servant. So the relationship, and you can go from bhava to prema, but the relationship is a little weaker. There's a dasya rasa, and it's a little weak because we see Krishna as Supreme Lord, or Vishnu as Supreme Lord, etc. And if one goes through Raganuga Bhakti, which is more spontaneous, less reliance on rules and regulations, not seeing Krishna as Supreme Lord, but as friend or lover or whatever, the relationship is more intense, and it's also considered to be quicker. Either leads to bhava stage. At bhava stage, it's no longer, Vaidhi Bhakti is no longer all rules and regulations, it's also spontaneous. In either case, it becomes spontaneous, but the mood is slightly different because one's seeing Krishna as God or Vishnu as God in Vaidhi Bhakti, and in Raganuga, we lose that identity, and we see Krishna as a friend, Krishna as a lover, Krishna as the baby, etc. And we don't see him as Supreme Lord. So the relationship becomes more intense. So, through Vaidhi Sadhana, you go through Vaidhi Uttabhava and to Vaidhi Uttaprema. Utta means arising from Vaidhi, we get prema. Or through Raganuga. What's the difference? The end result will be that our prema, we'll also see him as God in Vaidhi Utta Prema. And through Raganuga, we see Krishna as friend,
whatever. We don't see him as God. That's what happens. So the sadhana determines the final result. So we got a bhava stage. The sthayi bhavas manifest. We said there was 5 sthayi bhavas: Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. So Vishnu Chakravarti compares them to different juices. Dasya is like grape juice, and Sakya Rasa is like sugarcane juice, and Vatsalya is like jackfruit juice, and Madhura Rasa is like mango juice. So they're different tastes. They're all sweet, different tastes and different intensities. But in general, people will prefer the mango juice. So therefore, he says the Madhurya Rasa is the most preferable, like the mango is preferable, but the others are tasted. Some particular people will go for jackfruit juice or grape juice or whatever. So therefore, there are devotees in Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. Shanta is a rather neutral rasa, so the devotees generally do not aspire for that. But persons like the Kumaras are in Shanta Rasa. They recognize the Lord, they appreciate the Lord, but it is distant. Slightly sweet water, maybe. Coconut water. Coconut water. Glucose water, maybe. So in the stage of bhava, we had the sthayi bhava manifesting, Shanta, Dasya, etc. And we had the vibhava and the sattvika bhavas, anubhavas, and vyabhacharya bhavas also manifesting. So this will produce rasa. But is not really complete in this stage. The mamata is the possessiveness of Krishna's bhava is intense in bhava stage. There's still a little obstacle left. So these things don't manifest fully. There we had previously the explanations of those things. So that's bhava stage. Okay. And then we get to prema, the last stage. Okay, last stage. So we had the bhava was the flower, fully manifested flower. Asakti was the bud. And then we enter the flower. And then we get the fruit. So prema is the fruit. When we get the fruit, the other things don't disappear. So we still have bhava there. We still have asakti in one sense. The positive aspects of all of these things remain. So we also get kleshagni, anarjana vritti, sudurlabhata, moksha laguta kriti. Those remain also. And we get some extra qualities also as well. So what do we get? 2 qualities that manifest in prema are sandrananda, concentrated bliss. There was bliss in bhava stage more than in brahmananda, but the bliss in prema is even much more than the bliss in bhava stage. So it's called sandrananda, not just ananda, sandrananda. Very concentrated bliss. And Krishna Karshini manifests in prema. Prema attracts Krishna. Krishna becomes the servant of that person in prema. Of course, all bhakti is attractive to Krishna, but Krishna surrenders to the person in prema, most of all. And there was possessiveness in bhava stage. It becomes extreme possessiveness in prema, so that one cannot separate oneself from Krishna for a moment. And if one does, one goes into greatest misery. So there's a great greed for Krishna, which overcomes all obstacles. That's actually the definition of prema, that all obstacles disappear. And the example is given of the gopis. All obstacles are put in their way, and still they went to Krishna because of prema. So the parents tried to instruct them, the husbands tried to instruct them, everybody. They locked them in the house, still they went to Krishna. So there's no obstacle can obstruct prema. So Krishna does not appear constantly, he'll appear suddenly and then disappear. And then consequently the person develops more attraction and greed for Krishna. And longing keeps increasing, and one gets more bliss. Krishna appears to all the senses. Before, in bhava stage, the senses, the hearing, smelling, tasting were there. And suddenly in prema, simultaneously all the senses are affected by Krishna, perceiving Krishna. So, he reveals his form through the eyes, fragrance through the nose, voice through the ear, touches the devotee, revealing his youthfulness, reveals taste by Madhurya Rasa, and then simultaneously everything is manifest to the devotee. It's called Audharya. And he bestows Kripa Shakti, by which the devotee can experience all of Krishna's qualities. So, as I said, the Supreme Lord is not always manifest. So when the meeting takes place, the devotee experiences the highest bliss. And separation, then he feels pain, greatest pain. But then the Lord comes again, and then he gets bliss again. So there's constantly getting bliss and pain, bliss and pain. So, and we'll see that in the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri. Sometimes he'd be in great agony and be lamenting and scratching the wall and doing all sorts of injuring his body even, yeah? And other times in great bliss when he sees Krishna. So this is what happens to the devotee in prema. Great separation, great anxiety, and then great bliss in meeting the Lord. So, at this stage, at one stage, the body itself is in Bhava stage, body was like useless. In prema, it becomes even worse. It is an obstacle, absolutely an obstacle to the prema. And with that material body, one cannot experience everything in prema, so it's actually an anartha. So therefore, at a certain stage, the devotee gives up his material body completely, enters into a spiritual body, and goes to the spiritual world, like that. Okay, that's it. So we have the stages here. Shraddha, Sadhusanga, Vajanakriya, Anarthanavritti, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, and Prema. These are mentioned in the Nectar Devotion. There are higher stages. Thought Prema is the end. No. It's only the beginning. So the fruit was the Prema, but there are higher fruits also. So Sneha is higher than Prema. When Prema becomes very thick and the heart melts, it's called Sneha. You cannot tolerate separation. Higher than that is Man. This takes place in Madhurya Rasa only. In this, pride and anger manifest in the gopis, for instance. Pranaya. Sneha loses its respect. And there's a complete intimacy with the Supreme Lord. Raga is even more intense. Even a slight indication of Krishna will produce the greatest happiness, in spite of being completely sad or lamenting. If a slight appearance of Krishna will give the greatest happiness. Anuraga is even higher. Every experience becomes ever fresh. And Mahabhava is the highest stage, only experienced by the gopis. And in that stage, there's all sorts of remarkable symptoms. So, we go from Rati or Bhava to Prema, to Sneha, to Man, Pranaya, Raga, Anuraga, and Mahabhava is the highest stage of all. I wonder what that, well actually, these are also manifested in the different rasas. So Prema is Dasya Rasa, for instance, and Sneha will be Sakya Rasa, and Vatsalya Rasa goes up to Raga. And everything after that, Anuraga, Mahabhava is only Madhurya Rasa. So these are greater intensities of loving relationship after Prema. Okay. That was a separation prayer, no? You've gone to Mathura now, I cannot see you. That's Radha lamenting for Krishna's separation. So that's a Vipralamba Bhava.
Generally, we have to go through all stages. Get up to, at least you have to get to Nishta. Before that's a little uncertain. If you get a Nishta, then you generally are going to go to Asakti, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, Prema, in general. And that's one commits great aparadhs. Well, if we see here, we can say that most of the devotees are somewhere in the Madhyama stage. They're not at the Kanishta stage because the Kanishta doesn't even appreciate other devotees. He doesn't know scripture. So the Madhyama appreciates other devotees, sadhu sangha. He understands scripture, accepts all the conclusions, understands the difference in devotees, etc. So most people are going to that stage, Madhyama, which means in terms of they're somewhere between Anartana, Vritti, and Nishta, somewhere in that area. Well, we said there were symptoms here, symptoms of anishta, like Vishaya Sangara, Tarangarangani, etc. If you're anishta, nishta was absence of loya, vikshep, etc. So there are symptoms by which one can judge certain levels. Well, Madhyamadikari has to become Uttama. Can, but of course that means he would be in Madhurya Rasa. If he doesn't choose Madhurya Rasa, choose Sakya Rasa, he would come to the Sneha level only. But it's above Prema anyway. Oh, it's not finished. Yeah, this is an analysis of attachment. We talked about attachment. So we have material attachment and spiritual attachment. So attachment's not wrong, but it has to be directed towards Krishna. If it's attached toward ourself and material objects, then it's opposite. So we call this mamata, possessiveness, and ahankta, concept of I. So in the material world, this is ahankara. I am the material body, I'm attached to these material things in my material body. So this is not good. This is opposite of prema. So if we simply try to remove the ahankara, we end up with liberation. The other ahankara is an identity. I am so-and-so person, and we relate to Krishna. So ahankara is not bad. It's actually inherent in the jiva, but not the false ahankara. That's due to the, material coverings. So the real ahankara is I am a servant of Krishna. I exist and I have a possessiveness of Krishna. This produces prema. So we saw that mamata, or possessiveness, was there in bhava, and it was greatly possessive in prema. So we can analyze the stages in terms of attraction to matter, or possessiveness and material possessiveness, and spiritual possessiveness. So in the beginning stage, attraction to matter is achantiki, which means extreme. Mostly matter. A little bit of attraction to Krishna, like a little fragrance, gandha matra, a little trace is there. Mostly it's material attraction. That's Shraddha stage. But that's enough to begin the process of bhakti. It's enough to attract Krishna. Gandha, little gandha. Sadhu Sangha becomes a little bit bitter gandha. Gandha, not gandha matra, a little stronger gandha, a little fragrance. Bhajana Kriya, it's a little bit less attraction to matter, and Ekadeshavarti means a little part for Krishna. Little part of the Atma is dedicated to Krishna, the rest is dedicated to Maya. Anartana Vritti, prayakti means generally it's for matter still. Anartana Vritti, a little bit more for Krishna. Nishta, Bahudeshavarti, in many places, so it's like equal here. In Ruchi, then the matter becomes Ekadesha Vartini, becomes smaller, localized, and for Krishna becomes Prayaki, more general. So more for Krishna, less for Maya. In Asakti stage, Ganda, for a trace of material attraction, and for Krishna's Purna, it's almost complete, you say. And in Bhava stage, Gandamatra and Achantaki, very, very strong attraction to Krishna, very, very little for Maya in Bhava stage. And in Prema, nothing for Maya. And Parama Achantaki, extremely for Krishna only. So this is just the English translation of that. Okay, so accordingly, as we get part of one, less of one, we get more of the other. We have more of Maya, we have less of attraction to Krishna. We have more of Krishna, we have less of it. So the more you fill yourself up with Krishna, the less Maya is there. So when you completely fill yourself up with Krishna, then no more Maya. Yeah? So one of the activity is to increase the attraction for Krishna. Automatically the attraction to Maya decreases. If we only try to get rid of the Maya, this is like jnana. So we get rid of the attraction to Maya, not by suppressing things, but by just developing the attraction to Krishna. When that's complete, then automatically attraction to Maya is gone. Like that. So therefore, this is again that diagram. So as we progress, the attachment to Krishna increases and the attachment to matter automatically decreases. The effort is not on liberation and getting, destroying ahankara, etc. That automatically takes place with the increase of bhakti, attraction to Krishna. Okay. In terms of meditation, what is the progress? We can concentrate on the Lord in bhajana kriya temporarily only. At Nishta stage, still material traces disturb it. In Ruchi, thinking of Krishna becomes long-lasting. We're able to concentrate for a long time. Asakti, as I said, is spontaneous, so it's very deep meditation on the Supreme Lord. In Bhava stage, Spurti means Lord manifests himself. Temporarily, but he manifests himself. Prema, Satyakar. Directly, you're with Krishna in the spiritual world. Okay, that's it.
Now, when we say somebody is a pure devotee, can we say that he is Mahima level higher than Mahima?
Well, it depends on what we mean by pure devotee. Pure bhakti, if we say the pure devotee performs pure bhakti is defined as sadhana bhakti, bhav bhakti, and prem bhakti by the definition of anya abhilashita sunya. Uttama bhakta, who begins sadhana bhakti with anarthana vritti, bhajana kriya, anarthana vritti, ruchi sakti, bhava prem. It's all considered pure bhakti if we follow what Rupa Goswami says. So at the very beginning of your sadhana, you're a pure devotee in one sense, because you're practicing pure bhakti. So that's a very general term. Usually in ISKCON pure devotee, we think of uttamadikari, which means a prem bhakta. But actually, pure bhakti itself means anya abhilasha sunya, which is sadhana bhakti also. There's three types of pure bhakti: sadhana, bhava, and prema. So even the sadhaka is doing pure bhakti, actually. So he's a pure devotee in one sense.